So hi everyone. So just before we get started, I'm gonna do a quick intro to our guest today. So Anthonia Aina is a researcher at UofT who explores the potential use of music in stroke therapy through its emotional and reward-based benefits. She has a background in kinesiology and physiotherapy and integrates topics from fields like neuroscience, psychology, and motor learning into her research, which helps us to shape a better understanding of the factors that influence human movement and behavior. So if you're someone who's interested in the clinical applications of music, this conversation might be of interest to you. So now that we have that brief introduction, we can start with our first question for you. So we were just wondering if you could walk us through more in depth your educational journey and how you arrived at your current research, and what got you interested in the brain and music.
Sure. Thank you, Shristi. And as Shristi said, I do have a background as a physio because I train internationally from Nigeria, the University of Lagos to be specific. So essentially, after high school, I decided to go into a medical space. And initially, I wasn't very sure exactly what that meant. I only knew about doctors or nurses or pharmacists. And I originally applied to go into the medicine and surgery program because that's how it kind of works back home. You apply to go into a program. If you meet the requirements and take all of the exams, then you can be admitted into that. So I did that, and I did get an admission into the program of my choice. But just before I got to the level or the stage of accepting that offer, that admission offer, I decided to shadow a surgeon. And I actually hated the experience. I did not like it. Um, and I realized that maybe surgery was not for me. And so the next question was, what other option was out there that I think I would enjoy and like? And just as I was going through that experience, I did meet a physiotherapist and also shadowed that person. And I'm like, exactly, this is the kind of life I wanted essentially. Like I enjoyed the experience of being in a space that I'm still able to help people and ensure that people were as healthy as they were, without some of the downsides of, or what I considered the downsides of being a surgeon. And so, long story short, I applied to the physio program and I got in. And over that journey, I did have so many experiences and it was fun. But in my final year, I decided to undergo a project that was literally titled The Effect of Music Listening on, I think, depression, post stroke depression, and motor function. That was the exact title of my undergrad thesis, which is kind of the same thing that I'm doing now. But that was very much at an undergrad level where I explored music listening. And while people underwent their conventional rehabilitation, like time or rehabilitation process in the clinic. So I had patients who listened to their own selected music and people who did not. And so they did this for 6 weeks. Again, now looking back, I can critique that work better. But what we realized from that 6 week study was that we began to see a trend towards significant difference in the motor function that we measured and collected. We didn't quite reach significance, but it was quite a significant effect size. But for when it came to like the depression scale, we did actually see some significant differences between the two groups, which was very interesting. And I would say basically opened me to this whole world of research. And I was excited about that study. And I had more questions. I guess the biggest question I had was, what about music, or how did this music impact or cause this outcome that we saw during that undergrad research project? And the next stage was to explore how the auditory system, so sounds, impact movement, and that was exactly what I did in my master's, which was at the University of Manitoba, Winnipeg, Manitoba. And there I joined the faculty of kinesiology for my master's, and I looked at how sound affects how model planning and model execution. So basically, how we move. And the next progression was okay, now that I've looked at sound in the simplest form, so like clicks and more simple metronomes, um, we can complicate it a little bit, which is what music is. It's like a complex combination of sounds and rhythms and all of that. And now in my PhD, I'm looking at how sound impacts model learning, so even learning a task, and also like movement and like movement planning and movement outcomes. First off, in neurotypicals, and neurotypicals is people who are apparently healthy, and transferring that into a clinical population to see how it does impact movement. Because there's so many literature, and when we look at the literature, there are so many theories that has been used to explore it. I just felt like there are certain areas that has not really been looked into extensively, which I can talk about a bit more, just to like talk about the theoretical basis of my study. But that's been my journey, my academic journey, essentially going from training as a physio. I did work for a couple of years before transitioning to my master's, and there's been also influences from my experience there. And then from my master's to my PhD at UofT currently.
Oh, that's so interesting. Seeing how, like, I guess it was a good idea that you shadowed the physiotherapist before you got into the program.
Yeah.
Um, could you actually explain a bit? Because you said in your master's you were studying the effect of like sounds in, was it stroke patients?
No, it was in neurotypicals too. So just
Neurotypicals.
how people plan movement when there is sound versus no sound, and how different type of sound can impact the execution of movement. So movement planning, and movement control, essentially in very simplistic terms. So we did a lot of kinematics. So basically recording the movement trajectories of people and seeing how like people the strategies people use when there's sound that may or may not contain information about the movements. That was kind of what my master's thesis was about.
Interesting. Is it
Um,
like, or
Go
sorry,
ahead, go ahead.
is it like, did you have sound as in like rhythm? Was that the main thing?
So my own study did not have rhythm. It was basically like a metronome, like a
Oh,
kind of sound, like a tick, like continuous tick. And we had different types of sound and positions of sound because we had, well, the experimental setup had like speakers that were hidden behind the computer. And there were two different sounds, and basically the sound was supposed to kind of prime you to the location of the target that was going to come up. So you were essentially asked to
mm-hmm.
reach to a target, but you did not know where the target was going to show up on
Mm-hmm.
the screen. And so certain sounds that were higher pitched and lower pitched. If well, we told them or participants that well, if you hear higher pitch, technically it should be on the upper level of the screen, but that was not always correct. Like we mismatched it sometimes, and we basically looked at how people were pre-planning those movements. Um, and saying if it matched or it did not match. Like, how did your plan or what did you do to change the strategy when you already planned a certain movement based off what you heard versus if it were incorrect or if it were correct, right?
Mm,
So, yeah.
I see.
I was just curious to know, you mentioned that you had some work experience before your master's. So what exactly did you do during that time?
Oh, okay. So right after I finished like my after I became licensed as a physiotherapist back home in Nigeria, I first of all worked at a hospital, and it was a compulsory internship. You had to do a 1 year internship program before you were allowed to go into the field as an independent physiotherapist. And in that year, you did, I mean, I worked in different areas of physiotherapy. So from pediatrics, which is working with children, to orthopedics, which is working with people who have had different orthopedic injuries, um, to we had neuro, which was a bit more, a little bit of different neurological cases, right? We had people with MS, with different Parkinson's and stroke. But specifically, we also had like a stroke unit, like a dedicated stroke unit, because we had like inpatient and outpatient settings too. And interestingly, I did enjoy the stroke unit the most because I found it the most challenging and also the most collaborative. And if you might already know or from, I don't know, experience or from conversations, you know that a stroke is a multidisciplinary, like managing a stroke is not, it's not a simple case where you're like, okay, go see a surgeon and you're fine. You have to work with a surgeon. The nurses have to come together, the social worker, the psychiatrist, the psychologist, the physio. It was a thing. Like we all had to work hand in hand. And I actually enjoyed the fact that I believe we got better outcomes when we worked as a unit, like as a collaborative unit versus independent unit. Because during my training, during my clinical rotations, during the physio training, where I worked, it wasn't as collaborative as much. And so um, that experience of being fulfilled working within the stroke unit was something that, and my questions that I also had from my undergrad research was like, it kind of just solidified my thought process. Like, you already enjoy um, working with this group of people who have had a stroke. And I think it was what's going to like figure out some of the questions that I did not find an answer to during my undergraduate research. Um, but going away from the clinical aspect of things, I also worked just right after my internship. I worked with a national football team. Interestingly, the AFCON, and by football I mean soccer. Canadians call it soccer. um, I was gonna say currently the AFCON, like African Cup of Nations team, is going on currently, and Nigeria is in the team. So yay to Nigeria! I think we just got to the semi-finals. But yeah, I used to work with one of the national football clubs, Remo Stars, and that was also a very beautiful experience. I was completely just working in the sports context there, and it was just like working with some boys. It was fun. It was actually very fun, and it was so different from what I was used to working in the clinic. It was a lot of orthopedic cases because, as you can imagine, it's a lot of sports injury, and I think that also built my interest within the exercise space, right? Like it's soccer, and I guess that was kind of what pushed me more towards the Kane faculty. Is like, yeah, like if, for example, again, as a young person, I was like, well, I think kinesiology is a great space. Like I get both benefits of, I can learn more about like sports and sports rehabilitation on the side while I work on my like research interests, which is exactly what has been my experience. Working within the King faculty, I've had to TA courses or teach courses that are very related to like exercise prescription. I've had the opportunity to work with athletes too. In the Canadian context, I've had the opportunity of like working as a fitness specialist at the university gym, both at U of M and very briefly at the University of Toronto. So I felt like I just had like both of my work experience kind of played out in my master's again. And just after working with that sports club for also slightly over a year, I went back to academia. I started working with the university that I graduated from, so the University of Lagos, very briefly before I packed my bags and moved across the world um, to experience what it was like, first of all, living in winter, and also pursue my research question of trying to understand how sounds and essentially music does, how that impacts movement overall. So that's a little bit about my work experience before coming in here. And like I said, since coming here, I've worked mostly with the university within the faculty of kinesiology and also a little bit on the fitness side of things too.
Very cool that you got to work with that sports team.
Yeah, that was actually a cool experience, to be honest. And I got to
Very
travel. It was so much fun.
That's so awesome. Like your work experience has like there's so much breadth in
Hmm.
terms of the experiences that you've gotten.
Yeah.
Um,
Uh,
Betty, did you want to?
yeah, I just have like a bit more lighthearted question, but like, do you have like a personal connection to music? Like, did you really like music growing up? Is that why you wanted to look at like sounds and the effect of music?
Well, as an African, we do enjoy good music.
Mhm.
Nigerian, especially. If you look at the international music space, I feel like Nigerians are dominating the space. So I grew up listening to music. I did not play any music or like create music specifically. So I definitely do not have that as a background. But I personally enjoy listening to good music and groovy music. That's one thing with me. And growing up to, or like, especially when I was in the university, I did attend like quite a bit of like concerts here and there. And I also enjoyed or noticed this community that it builds. Like there is just this energy that comes with being in a space of music lovers or people. When good music is being played, it changes the whole experience.
Mhm.
And that was another thing that I anecdotally noticed, not only during my undergrad research, but even in my master's, especially when I worked as a fitness attendant at the university's gym. This was something that this particular experience happened so many times that I can't even count it. Where people would like come into the gym and were like they're coming in to work out. Like they have this scheduled session, and as they like walk up the stairs, because it was like a, they'll be like, "Oh no, my headset is dead. Okay, bye." I'm like, "What do you mean? What do you mean? Okay, bye." Like you can still walk out. Like what exactly is okay, bye? And it was interesting. Like this happened so many times. And I also realized that many times I would ask my friends or people, like when I noticed that happen, I'd be like, hey, could you just tell me a little bit about what you just did? Like, why did you think that you could not work out today just because your headset is dead or they forgot it at home and they're like, oh, I'll come back. I just need to go pick it up. Like, what are you supposed to do? They're like, oh, today I wanted to do leg day. I was like, boy, you can still do your leg day, right? Like, you can still squat. You can do everything. You don't need your head. Like, what does your headset do to you? And they're like, ah, never mind. Like, I just need my phone or I just need my headset.
Mhm.
Um, and I was like, that's exactly what my question was. It was like, you know how to do this movement. Like, it's not new. You're not even learning it. You can run on the treadmill, you can do a push up, you can do whatever. In the grand scheme of things, your headset, it sounds like it should not be that important, but it happens to be one of the most important gears. And when I say headset, I mean the music because it's
Mhm.
not the headset, it's the music that is impacting people's experiences and people's abilities to also complete um, the physical activity that they have planned to achieve. And the experience is very similar to my or like the undergrad experience, where when you tell people, like patients especially, like, hey, okay, we need to do this regimen, you would see patients maybe sometimes grudgingly do it with you, or they're not just in the mood, they just don't want to engage with you. But the moment that music, especially the one that they chose and they want, comes up, there's this whole change in the experience where they're better engaged in the activity. And one of the biggest, I say, feedback or biggest comments that we see in a lot of rehab papers is like, we need a lot of repetition for you to be able to achieve recovery. And if we're not hitting that repetition, like the high rep, then you might not benefit a lot from this rehab experience that you're paying so much for. And so, one way to encourage people to engage, and very easy to implement way, is having music.
Mhm.
But the question is, what is it about the music? Other than, like, we acknowledge the psychological benefits, but when it comes to the modal benefits, like, how does it change the way you move? And in ways that we're not even able to see, it does change the movement. There's literature looking at human movement trajectories and seeing slight variations in way people are even planning their movements before executing the movement when we have music or sound, which is sound was my master's thesis. It does change your movement planning and your execution, just having sound versus no
Yeah.
sound or no music.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And I also like I definitely relate to that feeling of wanting to do physical activity or even when I'm going on a walk or something and wanting to have my headphones just to be able to listen to some music. It's almost like having the music gives you that motivation to do it. So now sort of getting into the mechanism, if you could just maybe explain a little bit about the pathway or the mechanism through which music influences um, movement initiation and execution and like through the brain pathway in stroke patients
Well,
or in
I
general.
in general, I can talk about it
Mhm.
in general
Yeah,
more because
yeah,
the thought process as well. We all have very similar brain paths. The only difference in stroke is there's been some injury,
right.
and the brain's just trying to recover. But in general, there's certain explanations that has been provided in the literature, and one of them is the entrainment effect. And basically what this means is that our bodies tend to synchronize with the rhythm of the music that we listen to. So think about when you're like maybe driving down or driving, and there's a music and you find yourself nodding your head or like tapping your feet or like bopping your shoulders without really noticing it. It's just like, oh wait, my head is like bopping, and that's literally the entrainment that we're talking about. And especially when you're completing a rhythmic task. So, for example, running, where there's like a certain rhythm, you find that people sometimes would have like certain playlists for that kind of task because of the rhythmic benefit, like the fact that your body tends to just like sync to that rhythm. And so that's one studied mechanism that music has been shown to benefit movement or affects the way we move, or assist, again, especially during rhythmic tasks, which tends to be a lot of our lower limb tasks, so walking, running, jogging, right? Those are very, very rhythmic kind of in nature. But when we look at upper limb tasks like our hands, that is not too rhythmic as much. So we have the we have other mechanisms that has been provided or that has been talked a little bit in the literature. So one of it is that when we listen to music, it does impact our reward systems. And when there's that impact on the reward system, that we secrete dopamine. And what dopamine does is, or whenever you feel rewarded, and this is the area that I am looking more into, is when you feel rewarded, you're encouraged to repeat the task, right? So, if you look at a lot of psychological paradigms, we also see the use of reward and punishment, right? If you want to encourage a behavior, you provide reward, and when you want to discourage a behavior, you provide or you can incorporate some form of punishment, whatever that may be. And so it's the same idea that I'm basically exploring, but in this scenario, we're using music as the rewarding experience or stimuli, whereby you can engage longer because you want to keep enjoying the benefits of the dopamine secretion within the brain. And there's been so many neurophysiological studies that have basically provided um, some validity to this explanation, whereby they've done like brain scans for people listening to music or fMRI or different kind of exploration, and it's been shown that within the like reward system with the brain, like the nucleus accumbens, the midbrain, we see a lot of this activation of this neural pathways that that becomes lit when, or that becomes active when we feel a connection to the music. And this also gives us also an explanation as to why not all music would give us the same benefit, right? Like if, for example, you are someone who enjoys rock music, right? You might feel the secretion when you listen to rock music versus if I absolutely cannot stand rock music. Like don't really I would not benefit as you would benefit, and vice versa. Like if I enjoy classical music, for example, and you really don't enjoy classical, yeah, you just might not care, right? You might not benefit from, excuse me, from the classical music. So those are two very prominent, what's the word, theories in the literature. There are other theories that I can definitely talk about. Just a second. I don't know, my computer is glitching. That I can talk about. Can you hear me, Aura? Aura?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So those are some theories that we have looked in. Again, there's also the cognitive benefits. Like that, there's a whole Mozart theory part of it that, and we talked about that in even in my undergrad research where we saw like reduced depression, like reduced measures of depression when people listen to music again that they can personally connect to. So again, not all music, definitely not all sounds. Um, yeah, those are like the two major ones. But
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so just as a follow-up then, if you could maybe mention maybe if there are any big names in sort of the research and literature that we can look into.
sure. So when we're looking at the entrainment effect or the entrainment research, we one of the biggest names that comes to life is Michael Thaut, and interestingly, that name was one name that I just kind of stuck, especially during my undergrad research, because I was like, every time it's always like Michael Thaut, like there's always Michael Thaut on the paper. So Michael Thaut is one of the pioneer researchers that looked into music effects or the entrainment effect of listening to music. And again, the theories I'm talking about are more geared towards music listening. There are all other theories that comes to music making, which is a whole completely different
Oh,
side of literature. But my research is not really focused on music making. But when it comes to musical listening and entrainment literature, one of the pioneer researchers for sure is Michael Thaut. When we also look at music listening and looking at the reward system of things, we want to reference people like Virginia Penhune. We want to look at the Schillenberg's group. I just try to remember their first name, but there's the Schillenberg and the UofT staff. Virginia Penhune is at Montreal, I believe. So many of the music listening literature actually is pioneered in Canada, including Michael Thaut. Michael Thaut is a staff at the UofT too, I believe psychology faculty. And so those are big names. There are a whole lot of, and those are like the big labs. So there's so many other people that have come out of that labs. But essentially, once you can find these names, you potentially are going to find a whole web of literature just spamming out of finding these people. I'm just looking. Oh, then there's Valerie. Valerie is a more recent researcher um, that also does a lot of music and groove and reward type of literature. And of course, my supervisor, Dr. Joyce Chen, you obviously want to find um, works by Dr. Joyce Chen. She's just a bit more into music listening, but also into um, brain stem type of literature. So you're going to find a little bit of brain stimulation and stroke type of research. We want to look at another researcher is Benjamin Gould. Their group again very similarly. I think they're from the Zatorre, Robert Zatorre. I don't know if I mentioned that. Robert Zatorre is another um, researcher that you're probably going to see when you read literatures that has to do with music listening and its impact on movement and music essentially. I think I mentioned Glenn Schillenberg already. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this. Um, and it's kind of thinking about like some of the research being done at UBC. We know like the founder of our club actually does research on music listening and Parkinson's. So he does research where I think it's also similar where you can like select your own music and it helps with some symptoms with in regards to like apathy when it comes to Parkinson's. And I feel like over the years, we've kind of seen a movement towards integrating music therapy in healthcare and like investigating it in research. Um, and I've even heard of like using music to help Alzheimer's patients
Yeah,
with memory and
because of
stuff.
the cognitive benefits. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
just sorry, just not to cut you off, but when you look at Alzheimer, it also has to do with the dopamine system, right? Like when
mhm,
the same with Parkinson's, it's all some type of physiological impact on the dopamine system, and anything that can help with rebalancing what's going on within that sphere or space of things would essentially benefit the outcome. So that's why we see that music will impact Parkinson's, because Parkinson's also very much has I mean, it's neurophysiologically dependent on dopamine too.
mhm.
Same with Alzheimer's. So it's not surprising that music definitely comes in handy when it comes to managing these conditions.
Yeah, it's really, I feel like almost people don't really think about music as a healthcare like tool, but if you really think about it, there's so many benefits that you get from listening to music. Um, where would you say like where do you see the role of music in healthcare? Maybe 10 to 20 years from now?
I would eventually love to see it being used more and being intentionally used, not just used, intentionally used in as an adjunct to therapy or to healthcare management. And
Mhm,
why I'm expanding it past therapy is even in I've seen literature of people within the ICU and how music impacts even that. Music in in labor, like in childbearing, that there's a bit of literature there. So it does go past. I feel like if you move, if you're a human, you potentially would benefit. Like even if you, it just needs to be intentionally used. And what I see presently is it's more of a blanket type of use. So, for example, um, there's like maybe a Parkinson's class, right? And there's like, okay, we're gonna do this dance routine or this something music making session,
Mm.
because music making is also very effective, um, without really personalizing it. And
Mm.
that's where I guess my literature is. It would, to an extent, maybe lead to some benefit, but you would not be harnessing the maximum benefit that you could potentially be maximizing. Um,
Mhm.
so personalizing music therapy to the patient is something that I hope, hopefully, not even up to 10 years, very in the nearest future is incorporated. Also in like educating, like patient education or patient caregiver kind of education, right? Because therapy is not just within the four walls of, I don't know, a clinic or a hospital, right? Therapy goes beyond that. And I feel like music is a very inexpensive way of encouraging movement or encouraging engagement outside of the formal therapy space, especially if it's safe to do so. And um, I believe that if we can educate more caregivers to like listen, maybe encourage, like one way you can easily, or maybe not completely easily, like really bring encouragement out of the person being cared for is maybe incorporate their music from time to time, right? Like, okay, well, we've had therapy today, but we want you to move a little, and especially if the patient is not completely cooperative, incorporate that into your day-to-day life, right? I don't know how much you use music on your own, but I do use music from time to time. Sometimes just to set the mood, right? Like, okay, I'm going for this class that I know I need high energy to get through the class. Start the day with some high energy music, just to boost and prime myself to, um, I guess, give my best in such situations. But yeah, also within the research space, I really hope that we see more people explore how different, again, music is complex, like I said, right? You have, it's a complex mix of rhythm, tempo, and all of this intricate part. And different type of music has different types of structure, right? Like the rock versus the punk versus Afrobeat versus, I don't know, right? Like how best can we harness the intricacies of the music? I know there's been some literatures out there looking at tempo and the mode, rhythm. Does that influence things? I have seen literature too that talks about like, what was it? It was looking at the, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like the vibrations within the music. Like there is impact of those little vibrations that we don't even pay attention to. And I was like, wait, I haven't thought about that, right? And so I feel like there are so many ways that the music literature can be explored that even maybe I haven't even thought about. And so I'm hoping that people are more curious and maybe even more intentional. Another thing I'm really hoping is for us to collaborate with like music organizations, for example, Grammys and like other like big organizations that promote music, to also collaborate with the research aspect of things, right? Like encourage people to study the science behind some of the work that you put out to the world there. So that's another thing that I'm really looking forward to seeing in the near future, collaborations within the music industry and the research industry, and also the clinical industry, like a three-way collaboration, or even more way collaboration that I haven't talked about, but at least those three ways.
Mm. I feel like it'd be really cool to see a collaboration because I feel like they're so separate. Like people, when they think about music, they don't think about research or science at all. And when you think about research and science, you like no one thinks about like pop artists, but really encouraging that like integration. Like I feel like we would have so much power if we just like worked together.
I agree.
Mm-hmm. Shush, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I know you touched on it a little bit, but if you were to say or maybe talk about some of the main big questions that still have yet to be answered or are still kind of being answered, what would you say those are in the world of music therapy?
Um, I feel like there's so many. The first thing is when we think about music, it's very much just like every other sense because it's the auditory system, right? Like, and when we're talking about the senses, I would say like so many things are still really unknown when it comes to like the neuroscience of things. And the brain is such a beautiful and powerful machine, even though I don't want to call it a machine because a machine is something that you can predict. You really can predict the brain sometimes, right? And so I guess one of the biggest things that I'm looking forward to it is in future research is the integration of music into neuroscience with the growth of neuroscience. So we know that neuroscience is growing every day, right? Like there's so many things that sometimes people ask, and I'm like, I really don't know that answer for now, just because it's the brain is such a beautiful organization or a machine, and it's something that you observe in, I guess, an individual might not be replicated in another individual, even though they have the exact same neurological presentations, right? Like we like to say in our lab, like no two strokes are the same. Even if it's like the same place, the same size, the same everything, the presentation might be completely different, and you're like, wait, it's the same stroke. How come you are on like clinically maybe better than this other individual, right? So one thing I'm looking forward again is to see one music being personalized and really, and when it comes to personalization in clinical setting, think about where the person is at and the person's presentations too, because again, we when it comes to stroke specifically, it, it's it's harder, but it's also not. We tend to blanket a lot of things, even in the rehab space, right? Like, okay, well, this is the protocol for upper limb rehabilitation, but what if this person is already coming in like at this stage versus this other person, right? Like, think about and have conversations, right? Have conversations with the person, which is another thing that I really hope to see going forward. Is don't make assumptions for people, right? Like because they said, well, maybe I enjoy classical music. Maybe there's certain classical music that they really do not want to listen to in that moment. Also, be sensitive to. Again, I'm speaking more clinically now. Be sensitive to your patient's feedback, right? Like sometimes um, even though they in that moment maybe they really enjoy that music, but in that moment they might also have other things going on and they might not be suitable in that moment, be flexible in pivoting. And what else? Well, that's in the clinical space. Now in the research space, there's so many questions to be answered still. Like I was saying, like all of the nitty gritty of different type of music, and I don't know if we would eventually get answers, but with the use of machine learning and algorithms, maybe we can begin to like integrate some of this into our design, not implementation, in our design of our experimental procedures, and by that maybe think about the complexities of the different music that we're using. And why I say that is, for example, one of the questions I've had in my presentation of my data is how am I, like, how have I taken cognizant of the different unique aspects of each of the music. And to be honest, how do I do that when everyone is like unique? I'm asking people to give me their unique playlist that they personally enjoy. So maybe going forward, if someone were to maybe replicate my work, I don't know how you're gonna maybe integrate AI to like really break down the nitty gritty of each of the music, but that also brings a lot of external validity and internal validity questions. So as I'm saying, or as I'm talking through this, I guess it's, or the general advice is try to improve on what is out there. Whatever your question is, find out what is currently being done and see how you can improve it. And again, I know a lot of us tend to want to shy away from the use of AI, but I think it can be ethically incorporated into research, and especially during the research planning and research design phase, and who knows, maybe even in the implementation phase. But collaboration would be necessary at this point, right? We might need to do a lot more collaborative type of research with like music specialists, like those who music producers, maybe even um, the engineers too, like those who are able to probably integrate AI ethically, and clinical researchers too. So I guess collaboration too. I don't know. I feel like I rambled on now and I've lost track of what the question was.
No, that honestly makes sense though, because you mentioned that there are so many questions that still have yet to be answered, and that makes sense because, like you said, the brain is just such a complex organ. It's a complex system, and our relationship with music is so individualized. I think the main takeaway from this conversation is just that um, personalization, the personalization aspect is going to be huge in terms of optimizing the the use of music in therapy, to give each individual their unique, to basically cater it to each individual's unique characteristics. Um, yeah, so that makes sense. Um, Betty, did you have any other questions?
Um, I think that's kind of the main big questions that I have. Um, but yeah, I also like really want to see more collaboration with like researchers and creatives, because also in Vancouver there are so many local musicians and bands. Um, and seeing if they're able to work together, I feel like that'd be really cool.
Yeah.
Um, I have one more question that I'm curious about. Because you mentioned you really like groovy music. Do you have a song recommendation that you'd like to share?
Currently, I feel like, well, towards the end of last year, I started. Wait, are you still here? Okay, my computer did something. Um, Towards the end of last year, I started exploring international music that I don't even know what it means. I'm just like really enjoying the rhythm and how it sounds. Also, the past few days, it's been this song. And interestingly, I heard that this song was actually remixed by AI. So I'm like, okay, I'm enjoying an AI song, but for some reason, it is so cool. And it's called Papa Ute. It's in French, I believe, but it's from, I think, Algeria, somewhere in Africa. So that's the one song, and it's like everywhere on social media. If you like just Google Papa Ute. So that's one song I've really been listening to. There's been some songs from, I believe. Wait, let me just check my playlist. Um, my top songs. Let me show you. There's Samra. Um, and who sang Samra is by Saint Levant and Baby Loan. That's another song I have been really enjoying. Outside of like Afrobeat, so lots of Afrobeat music is like really dominating my playlist.
Mm.
There's Chella My Darling.
Shall
So it's by Chella, Chella, and it's called, or the title of the music is My Darling. So that's another song. And then K-pop Demon Hunters.
Oh.
I enjoy I enjoyed many of the songs from that animation or cartoon. That was also something. It was like big on my recap. Um, I enjoyed Sapphire by who sang Sapphire again? Ed Sheeran.
That's a
So
good one.
my playlist is very diversified. And it has to be because like I do music research and I interact with people and everyone's like I'm finding new music like every day.
Mm.
And so my playlist is like a mess, really. But it's a fun mess. It's a wonderful mess. And thankfully, with the integration of AI, I think it's been able to help me categorize things a bit. So depending on my mood, I can um, go to a playlist that suits the occasion that I'm preparing for mentally. And talking about suiting the occasion, I wanted to talk about something real briefly, and I don't know if I kind of touched on it about how amazing the brain is. And when we talk about music listening, not only are we like stimulating like the reward system, like there's a lot of communication, right? Like the when we listen to music, especially if it's a music that we know already, it also stimulates like the frontal lobe, like memory, right? Talking about Alzheimer's, right? Like, oh, you remember? I don't know if you have this experience where you hear something and you're like, oh, it takes me back to when I was 5 years old, right? Or it takes me back to my cousin's wedding because someone said something or we danced this particular dance, right? Um, we think about music also impacting our mood and our arousal, which is a whole big literature too. The mood and arousal literature, which you were talking about motivation, right? Like, okay, with this music, I'm really aroused. I can run 30 minutes on a treadmill and not get tired versus running 10 minutes and I'm like out of breath, right? Um, and yeah, very similarly to all other senses too. Like I'm focused on the auditory sense, but we've seen reports also from like the smell, like the
Mm.
scent giving you memories too. But anyways, long story short, I feel like music is a very inexpensive way to stimulate the brain and also encourage um, brain plasticity even because brain plasticity is encouraged by activation of so many like neural centers, especially during the acute phase, which is one thing that I don't think we talk a lot more about too. Like right, like within the acute phase where things are still a little bit more sensitive. And acute phase, I mean, like first 3 months ish of the stroke, where it's still a shock, right? Like that's where depression hits. That's where the realization of your life potentially changing is also coming to light, right? Like, yeah, oh, I used to do this and now I can't. So I find that music too is usually very beneficial and an very inexpensive way to engage people to also just like stimulate the brain um, to basically keep working even when the person might not physically be able to stimulate the brain because every time we move we're stimulating the brain essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Also, just going back to your Papaute recommendation, I remember like years ago when it first came out, like the original song. It's such a good song.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering the recommendation you gave just now. You said, is it an AI twist on it? Is it like a remix
Yeah, I
or
think it's a
okay?
twist on it because it sounds different. Like I know I've heard the original, which was a
Yeah,
band, but there's
so
like
good.
a twist, and I can't remember who did it, but because I was curious about, I was like, why does this song sound a bit different? And people were like, oh yeah, like AI, it's this particular one was just like so I don't know what they did to it. I guess they put a background bass or layer or something on it and added a little bit of something in it, but it sounds good and I'm enjoying the song again. So, and that's the beauty about music, right? Like music that you forgot about and you like rediscover it and sometimes nothing has even changed and you're like, wait, I'm still feeling chills again. Like I just like I never heard this song before.
Mm.
And those chills are essentially like you reaching peak enjoyment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also the aspect you mentioned about memory, the memories we have associated with certain types of music. It's such a therapeutic experience when you're listening to a nostalgic song. You just
Yeah.
have to like stop for a few minutes and just like take that experience in.
Hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, now we have a few recommendations from you. We actually have a Brain and Music playlist
Oh,
um, that we like have within our student community at UBC. So we just try to get students to like give us recommendations and we add them in. So we will add that. Um, but yeah, if there's nothing else from your side, Betty, this was really insightful, and I'm sure our Brain and Music community will enjoy listening to this conversation. Thank you so much for your time.
thank you for.
Um, yeah, for sure.